Greetings. Welcome back from lunch for folks that are here in person, and for folks that are joining virtually, welcome back as well. Repeating what you just heard, I'm Seth Hodgson. I will be your host for Reskilling, the daily approach. I am a VP of engineering at Udemy. I've been there about 2 years, and Udemy is an online learning platform. Hopefully some of you have taken advantage of it, are familiar with it. And if you're not, I encourage you to check it out later. So to start, let's do a quick thought experiment. Consider a year in the life of your company. Think forward a year out, right? A year into the future. What does your company look like? What's happening? This experiment was done by the British pro cycling team in the early 2000s. They were not good. They were really not good. And they brought in a new coach, and the coach's approach, his strategy, was something that he referred to as the aggregation of marginal gains. It sounds very complicated. Let's look at this graph and these equations to get a sense of what he was talking about. So if we have a system and we make it 1% better every day for a full year, at the end of the year, we will recognize a 38-time improvement in the system, which is striking. It's amazing, right? If we make our system 1% worse every day for a year, we're going to drive it to 0, or almost 0, practically 0. Let's not do that. So this coach, Dave Blairsford, he shows up, he institutes this program, and within 4 years, there's a striking change for the British pro cycling team. So they go from a very bad team to, from 2007 to 2017, absolutely crushing it. They're winning world championships, they're winning Olympic medals, they win multiple Tour de France's. And if you think about those successes are not isolated independent events. Winning a Tour de France doesn't just happen on its own, it happens as a result of an aggregation, of a long chain of small incremental improvements that happen consistently. So what does that have to do with learning in the flow of work? We're faced as technologists, as leaders, as developers, product folks, designers, with a changing reality. And this is always true, but perhaps especially true right now. A few of the key changes that I observe is first, the nature of work is changing. So the pace of change is not slowing down. That's not surprising. That's been true for the 25 years I've been in the industry. What is different is this shift to remote and hybrid and time-shifted or multi-time zone work. Upwork has a study recently that came out that forecasts that nearly a quarter of the US workforce will be fully remote by 2025, which is an 87% increase from pre-pandemic levels. That's striking, right? That's a fundamental sea change in how we work. In addition to how we work changing, the nature of the job we do is changing. And so for any occupation or role, we're forced to learn more and newer skills. So Gartner has a study, job skill requirements are increasing by 6% annually for a given role. And 29% of the skills, they did this analysis of job postings in 2018, 29% of the skills listed in those are going to be obsolete next year, right? So the type of skills that we have to do to be effective in our jobs are changing very rapidly. 90% of executives, McKinsey says, already have or expect to have significant skill gaps in their company with their staff, right? Which is not surprising. I think any of us, if we look around at our company, we could say the same thing. And the third challenge that's maybe a little bit more existential is a challenge in the space of employee engagement and motivation. So employees need to feel valued, feel understood. They need to have a healthy culture. They need to have investment in opportunities and learning and development. And sadly, most employees are not experiencing this in today's world, in this new reality. And so this last chart on the bottom right is a chart that Gallup generated. And that top green line is the percentage of US employees that are engaged at work. And we can see from 2020 forward, with the onset of COVID and macroeconomic changes, this is materially decreasing. The bottom red line is the percentage of US employees that are actively disengaged at work, right? That's frightening. But we can face this challenge, and we can respond to it in a healthy way. And I believe the way to respond to it is for all of us to turn our companies into learning companies. To do this, we have to intentionally design and adopt systems and tools and implement new habits in ourselves, our staff, our teams, in these 3 areas. So first, talent attraction and talent retention, attraction and continuous reskilling. It's a foundation. Second, scaling the expertise of our staff. And as an engineer, so my background is in engineering, when I think about this, I think about vertical scalability. And third, becoming a learning company. And this is about connecting the dots between the staff in our organizations, out to our partners and collaborating companies, our ecosystem, out to our customers, and getting learning loops happening across all those folks. And from my engineering point of view, I think about this as horizontal scalability. All right, so at Udemy, we have 5 core values. The central value that I've highlighted at the bottom is always learning. And so to address a lot of these challenges, I think becoming a learning company is the answer. And that requires a cultural shift for most of us. Most of us are, I know for myself, most of us are creatures of habit. We do the same thing every day. Learning is really hard. And so to actually become a learning company, you have to drive a lot of fundamental cultural change in yourself, in your teams, in your company. And in this talk, I'm going to run through a few of the ways that we're trying to do that at Udemy and observations that I have about these 3 areas. Hopefully that gives you something to take away and think about, perhaps apply in your companies. And we're trying to implement these tactics and these approaches to drive toward this cultural value at Udemy, right? To become a company that is actually always learning. If you care about company culture, our Chief Learning Officer, Melissa Daimler, recently released this book, Reculturing. It's a fun read. And culture is not something that you have. Culture is something that you do, right? It's a set of intentional behaviors and actions that you have to practice all the time, just like anything we learn. So that's a fun read if you're interested. So let's focus on this first area, this first focus area. How do we retain talent, attract new talent, and implement continuous reskilling? Retention really is the key, in my mind, to this whole area. In the science of cause and effect, things don't just happen. A little bit like the aggregation of marginal returns. You don't just win the Tour de France, right? It's through a lot of continued small investments that you get that good outcome. Retaining key talent, how do you get to that outcome? Consider colleagues that you've worked with that had an incredible positive impact on you and the company that you were at. And think about when their impact really burned in. When did it become apparent, the strength of their positive impact? It was not on day one, I guarantee it. And so retaining key talent, building and growing key talent is super important. And that's why I'm highlighting retention as the key here. To retain folks and to grow them, to unlock them, you need to give them opportunities, invest in upskilling and reskilling, and ensure that they're in teams that have a diversity of talent. And what's really advantageous about investing in and upskilling and reskilling this core set of folks in your company is that, I'm going to borrow from Ray Dalio. He has this book, Principles. It's a wonderful book. And this is a paraphrase of one of his principles. It states, remember that people tend to pick individuals similar to themselves. So include a variety of interviewers who can help to holistically identify what you're looking for. So if you're retaining people that are actually demonstrating the behaviors of being active learners, right? Not only is this good for you as a company and culturally, but they're going to select and pick out folks to add to the company that model those same behaviors. A body needs good diet to stay healthy, right? Your key talent to retain, grow, and engage them need a source of fresh, relevant learning content and activities. This needs to be a mix of lean back, passive learning, as well as lean in, active learning, learning by doing, and cohort-based immersive learning and practice. So at Udemy, what we use is our platform. And one of the advantages of this is that in our case, we have a marketplace model that has led to a huge corpus of courses, hundreds of thousands of courses, implemented by subject matter experts and instructors from all over the world. So we have 70,000 instructors that are developing content for the platform. What's nice about this is that it gives us really wonderful global reach. And in many cases, folks can learn in their native language. We also use AI and ML to auto-caption, auto-translate learning materials to make them more accessible to a broader audience and to drive personalization, recommendations, and so on. When you have that baseline of content, you can then gather it into custom courses or learning paths to upskill or reskill your folks targeting the skills that you need at your company to improve. And you can scale this in a way that works in today's environment, right? With remote, hybrid, being time zone friendly. On the right-hand side, you can see our Udemy employee onboarding learning path. And so this is a set of learning activities that people can interact with asynchronously, self-paced on their own. But we mix this in with synchronous Zoom or in-person events as well to enrich lock-in learning. And one of the really tricky things, I think, in today's reality is to help bootstrap authentic relationship and trust and social connection, right? Which doesn't often happen if it's just purely self-paced asynchronous learning. When you build these onboarding or reskilling courses or learning paths, whether it's content you're sourcing or content that you're developing yourself, I also think that one thing that's often overlooked is the criticality of investing in both technical and leadership skills. So I came up in engineering. There's this natural gravity for engineers to be pulled toward developing technical mastery. You don't have to convince engineers to learn about the latest cloud technologies or AI and ML or any of these topics or skill sets. So that's fine, but you need a learning platform that supports the skill sets and domains that you care about. But what companies tend to underinvest in is what I refer to as technical influence. And so you have all these amazing technicians, but they often underinvest in leadership or power skills. Why is this a problem? That graphic on the bottom right, that circle is your company. The arrows around it are functional leaders across different areas of the company. The purple arrows are engineering leaders. If those engineering leaders have not been encouraged to or supported to invest in leadership skills, effective communication, positive influence, alignment, getting to clarity with different points of view, probably is not happening very well. And so you can have amazing people that have a huge amount of creative life energy, trying to do great work, but pushing in different directions. At the end of the year, is the company circle over the goal? No, it hasn't moved at all, right? And so if you're intentionally investing in leadership skills, both at your engineering leadership level, but really all the way down through the engineering organization, you start to address a lot of these problems. You get to shared clarity, you get more effective communication, better conflict resolution. And once you align folks through these non-technical skills, but crucial skills, it really is amazing to me how far you can move and how fast you can move as a team when you're rowing together, as opposed to apart. Second area of focus is scaling expertise. So this is how you scale up individuals vertically, based on self-paced or cohort-paced learning. At Udemy, the way we do this is we're really shifting our focus toward learning by doing. And so a lot of ed tech platforms traditionally were focused on passive learning, lean back, watch videos. What we're trying to do is weave learning into the flow of work. And ultimately what that means is application of what you're learning. So stepping back to prerequisites for this, the first thing that you need is you need a foundation or a frame to understand the concepts, tools, and technologies that you're going to be working with, and that's the passive learning. Second, you need authentic, low-risk practice, hands-on practice. So for us, that's coding exercises, labs, workspaces, things like that. And once you've built your domain knowledge and are starting to be able to do skills, you need an assessment or a feedback loop to understand how effective you are, where you have gaps, where you should focus next. And that's assessments. These flow through to learning outcomes and ultimately insights into how individuals, teams, or organizations are learning. But the critical thing here really is that to become a learning company, you have to shift out of a mode where learning is just happening for the sake of learning. And instead, learning is happening for direct application in the flow of work. This is hard to do because learning is not easy. You know, it's real easy for me to camp out on the weekend with my kiddos and binge watch Netflix. It's not easy to learn a brand new skill. And so what we're doing at Udemy is we're actually carving out dedicated time every month called Udays, where we have a dedicated day, meeting free, no Slack, no distractions, and we just say, hey, just go learn, right? There are so many things all of us need to be learning, and there's not time for it, so we have to make time for it. This is, just hands down, one of my favorite things about this year, are the Udays, and I, with complete confidence, can state that if you were to ask all of my fellow Udemates, this is probably their favorite thing as well. And so I encourage you to take this home with you and consider applying a similar thing for yourself, your team, your company. And learning is social. So a lot of online learning has focused on technical skills, whether it's coding skills, whether it's CPA skills, whatever it is. But like I mentioned earlier, there's kind of chronic underinvestment in leadership and power skills on the technical side with your technical staff. And to learn these skills, you need a safe way to practice them. They're hard. I know they're very hard for me. First 10 years of my career, I was an IC. I would never have done what I'm doing right now. Second part of my career has been in management and leadership roles, and I've had to learn these skills, and I wish I had started investing in them much, much earlier. And so at Udemy, the way we accomplish this is through our cohort learning platform, which is a cohort-paced learning sequence that happens with a group of people. It's expert-led, so there's a facilitator or a moderator. And it's problem-based, meaning as a group, we figure out what are the skill gaps? What do we want to improve on? Is it managing through change? Is it effective communication? You identify the skill gap, you come up with a suggested treatment, and then as a cohort with the facilitator and the experts, you work through. And as you work through, apply it in your work. I had a chance to run through this earlier this year with a cohort at Udemy, and I was paired up with the head of our customer support group. And not only did I learn a huge amount as I went through it, but coming out of it, the cohort gave me an informal network, and I now have recurring meetings with the VP of customer support. So me on the engineering side, if you zoom out and look at the company, for us to be successful, it's actually critical that she and I have a great working relationship, but we didn't. And so coming up with ways to bootstrap these types of relationships aligned to learning and practicing key skills is really powerful. So the third area of focus is once you've laid the foundation, right? You're retaining good talent, you're investing in a learning platform. That second area of focus, you're investing in the vertical skill sets of your staff, helping them build expertise. This is where you graduate to really becoming a learning company. And like I said earlier, in my mind, if you think about a graph of all the folks in your company and all the partners and collaborating companies you work with in your ecosystem and all of your customers, and all of those individuals are nodes, and the connections exist between those. This is really about turning those connections into learning loops, right? Within your company, out to your collaborators, out to your customers. And it's when you turn on those learning loops across that whole network of folks that are engaged in a common purpose that you start to ignite collaboration and innovation in a way that just isn't possible otherwise. So this is a picture of Udemys Footprint on planet Earth. These are our offices. We have offices in North America, Turkey, Dublin, India, Brazil. What's beautiful about this to me is that the diversity of talent and points of view and life experience we have with folks from all of these places all over the planet is why Udemy has the content and the instructor community and everything else that it does, right? It is so global. The hazard with this sort of thing, and this is true of any company that's now dealing with remote first or hybrid or multi-region sites, is that it's real easy for expertise to get trapped in a pocket, right? To get trapped off in a pocket where I might ask, hey, who's expert in our company on X? And I don't know. Or, okay, you know, those 4 tables and my team have to work together on a matrix project. How do we collectively get aligned on how we're going to tackle the design challenge that's in front of us? And so learning in the flow of work in our current reality, it really demands that our staff connect with each other, and this doesn't happen to the degree that it should. And so this is a little bit of a call to action, but connect across the company and then capture learnings and turn those into an internal resource to socialize, share out, and teach and train yourself. Learning doesn't have to be one way. It doesn't just have to be consumption from external SMEs. You all have amazing experts inside of your companies that are teaching the folks in the companies. It's really just about making that slightly more formal and structured. Oops. Not advancing. Okay, so at Udemy, what does this transformation look like? How has this looked for me in the 2 years I've been here? We're certainly not at the end of the journey, but we're engaged in it. And I see this happening at 3 key levels. And so at the highest level, the 10,000-foot level, this is the executive staff, senior leadership in the company. And this is really about collecting and then socializing and teaching the company what the company-wide strategy is and what the core values and principles for the company are, and any preferences on tactics or strategic approach. Below that, you get into kind of the divisional or initiative scoped groups of people, and they have a need to gather their knowledge and socialize and teach each other, but at a slightly more concrete level. And you get down to the small cross-functional teams in our case, that are pairs of designers, developers, data scientists, product folks, and guilds, right? So perhaps you have a native apps guild, or a web front-end guild, or a event tracking guild, or whatever it is. And for those guilds, similarly, it's critical for those folks to have a process for capturing what they're learning and teaching the organization how to apply it. So I'm going to tell you a quick story about that middle lane. So the middle lane at Udemy, we're in the process of technical evolution, as all of us are at our companies all the time. And this is taking the form right now of us shifting our core domain services toward a model where we have a cleaner definition of concrete core entity types and services for managing those types, such as labs, courses, assessments, and so on, and capability services that are a bit more of a general interface that could apply to multiple concrete entities. And by this, you could think of, okay, I want to make some subset of our core entities searchable, or recommendable, or priceable, or reviewable, basically verbable. And so we're moving toward a clearer factorization of our services across these domains. How do we upskill and get there as a company? Part of it is the teaching of basically upskilling our teams and groups to understand how to work effectively in Kotlin, how to use Kafka, how to use cloud-native databases, if they haven't, right? So there's that stuff, and we can actually use pre-existing learning content from the platform to address those skill gaps. But then above that, there's the challenge of how are we actually taking all of those concepts, tools, and technologies, weaving them together in the context of our company to solve our unique customer problem. And there are no pre-existing courses or learning paths for that. And so Andy Schreiner, one of our principal engineers, this is a picture on the right of him teaching all of us how we're doing it, right? And this is in an engineering product all hands, and it gets added into a running custom course that we have internally at Udemy, which is these key trainings, right, about how we're evolving our platform. And I think this is really powerful and goes back to the point I made earlier that a lot of the learning that you all are going to need to do in your companies to become the best version of your company is not going to just be consumed external learning or external advice or input. It's going to be these internal communities of practice, right? So close, quickly. Let's go back to becoming 1% better every day. The trick with this is that there's no magic, and we can't be perfect. We're not going to win every race. And so the objective is not to get 1% better every day, because that's not realistic for me, and probably not for most of us. But we can aim in that direction. And how do we do that? Well, the way that we do that is we support our teams with systems and tools. For example, Stack Overflow for teams, Udemy Business. Like, you put systems and support in place for folks to be able to learn how to do their work better. And they start to make these 1% improvements as individuals, as teams, as initiatives. And we can apply that aggregation of marginal returns. And I'm not saying that we're all going to see a 38-time improvement at the end of the year, but I guarantee you that if this is working at all, you're not going to drop to zero, and you're not going to hold flat. You're going to go up and to the right. This is just a quick example of the fact that this is true. So Udemy Business, we have a lot of organizations that use us as a platform. Booz Allen is a federal contractor, right? A consultancy, maybe a little bit like Ernst & Young or Deloitte, these types of things. And so what they're doing is they have a lot of staff that they need to upskill in cloud technologies, data science, whatever it is, to work for and on government contracts. So recently, Booz partnered with Udemy to drive forward a tech initiative across their staff to upskill. Their goal was to upskill to 5,000 highly competent, effective data scientists. So they get the program running, they run through it, and I want to highlight two things here on the outside. And the first is, how do we become amazing companies? It's by betting on and investing in our key talent, right? Letting them know that they matter, that they're valued, and that we're invested in their growth and development. The hypothesis is that if you do that, you're going to have better retention, and those amazing folks are going to pull in more amazing folks, right? And there's a wonderful loop there. What Booz saw, I think this is pretty striking, is for folks that graduated from this program, they reported over time a 93% retention rate, which was almost 10% higher than their baseline retention rate. 10%, that's a big difference. And then they also reported a 3% increase in billable hours for the folks that were participating in this program. And for most of us in companies, there are a lot of things that we measure, right? And there are inputs to our system that move a lot more, that we can move much easier, like entry traffic or progression through funnels or that sort of thing. And there are outputs to our system that oftentimes are very hard to move, like our gross profit or Booz Allen's billable hours, right? And so a 3% change in your North Star trailing business metric is, again, very material. So I want to leave you all with a call to action. I want you, when you leave today, to really seriously think about how you can turn your companies into learning companies. And I propose that there are 3 focus areas that you can lean in on. First, talent retention, attraction, and continuous upskilling for your key talent. And the outcome of that is a world-class team. Second, investing in scaling expertise vertically in these individuals. And the outcome of that is that you address and close skill gaps, right, that you need to close to be effective. And third, tie this all together and become a learning company. You know, focus on context-aware, meaningful teaching and learning that you can do inside of your company with your peers. Find yourselves a platform that supports doing that. And that's going to drive staff efficacy. And like we saw with Booz or really any of this stuff, customer delight. And here at the end, I present you all with a gift. It's a QR code to a question and answer Slido. And my apologies, I was a little long-winded, and so I think we only have time for 1 or 2 questions. But first, from Daniel, how do you encourage engineers to want to skill up in leadership skills? In my experience, some of the best engineers sometimes prefer to stay focused on the technical skills without branching out to leadership tracks. Guilty as charged. I mean, you just described me. Full stop. You described me. And I think that the way that you do this, the way that you have to approach this, is you have to help them understand the why. And I think once they understand the why, they're gonna dive into it. And I've seen this happen for myself and for tons of the folks I work with. And what I mean by the why is just walk them through some thought experiments and say, you know what? Do you really want to live in a future where every conversation you have with your peers ends up in you all hating each other? Like, is that going to lead to a good outcome for you in terms of the systems you can deliver? You can't do it alone, right? Lost. Live together, die alone. Like, we're all in it together. And this is really one of the biggest issues, I think, in digital product development. And it's not specific to software engineering. You see similar things in product design and what else. But it's basically us getting in our own way and getting stuck in these habit loops where it's like, you know what? I don't want to learn. I just want to show up and type the same thing every day. And that's why this is really, at heart, the really hard thing about this is that to become a learning company, you're driving a culture change for individuals, for teams, and for the company. Okay, one more quick one, also from Daniel. How do you encourage, oh, no, sorry, that was the same question. Groundhog Day. Well, thank you all so very much for having me, being gracious listeners. And with that, we will wrap up questions and move to the next session.